Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to bring this to our attention that currently there's a Senate bill in the process that would restrict our ability to have representation in Topeka as a, to use a common term, as a lobbyist, our government relations person. I believe that it's critically important that we have representation in Topeka for so that our legislators will know our position on critical issues that the legislator faces. Also, to give information and education to the legislators. It's virtually impossible for them to read, know, and digest all the information that comes before them. And so when we have something particularly relevant to county government, we want them to understand the issue. And a third reason we need representation up there is to have information coming back to us on a timely basis. So the Senate bill that's currently under consideration would prohibit us from having representation in Topeka. And so I just thought it was important that this commission go on board as being opposed to Senate Bill 109. And so that's a brief recap of why I made the request for an off-agenda item.
Okay. I believe that the content of this is important, and would you like to read that, sir?
I can read that if you'd like.
Yes, sir.
All right. A resolution urging the state legislature to continue open dialogue with government entities in the legislative process. Whereas pursuant to KSA 18-187 and 19-101 fourth, Sedgwick County is organized as a body corporate and politic authorized to do all acts in relation to the concerns of the county necessary to the exercise of its corporate and administrative powers. And whereas pursuant to KSA 19-103, the authority of the county is exercised by the Sedgwick County Board of County Commissioners, the board, and whereas the board has supported for many years the partnership between federal, state, and local officials in establishing laws, statutes, and regulations that serve the best interest of our citizens, and whereas the opportunities for forthright interaction between legislators and local government officials help to share valuable data, perspectives, and possible consequences to proposed legislation. And whereas the board believes it is our responsibility to our legislative partners to help share this information about our different services, serving as subject matter experts to legislators in helping them make informed decisions for all Kansans. And whereas without this information sharing and dialogue, the decisions that are made during the legislative session could have unintended consequences to local government and communities in the form of unfunded mandates or unworkable statutes. And whereas the board believes that decisions about using resources of staff and or funding for government relations activities should be left to local elected officials who are closest to their serving constituents. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Sedgwick County Commissioners is opposed to SB 109 as proposed in the 2013 legislative session, and encourage legislators to continue to embrace the partnership of local and state governments working together and sharing information for the best interest of all Kansas. Be it further resolved that the Sedgwick County Clerk send certified copies of this resolution to members of our South Central Kansas legislative delegation. This resolution shall be effective upon passage by the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, thank you. My comments are I do think this is an attack on our free democratic system. It's important for, I feel it's important for me as a county commissioner to be able to lobby on behalf of my constituents. And if I have a person up there doing that on behalf of the majority of the council, I think it's appropriate. One of the most things I find an objection to this bill is that the legislators would only accept testimony from us or government taxpayer-funded entities, as it said, if we were to be invited up there. And that kind of reminds me of a king saying to a pheasant, "Thy may come forward, my ears will heareth you now." So I just don't appreciate that. It reminds me they don't want to hear what we say, and it just makes no sense. It's absolutely absurd, in my opinion, this bill. Commissioner Peter John.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I was opposed to bringing up this item, and I just found out about it this morning, so it was a little bit of a surprise, I do want to provide some comments on it, and clearly state for the record it would still allow all of us as citizens to speak and to provide input on legislative issues. And I understand the legislative risk. In fact, it was said back in the 19th century, and I've heard various folks attributed to who actually said it. Mark Twain's probably the best known person who it's attributed to, but I don't believe it's original with him. No one's life, liberty, or property is safe while the legislature is in session. And Senate Bill 109, obviously relating to lobbying and the use of tax funds to lobby, is an issue that I've felt strongly enough about that earlier this month I went up to Topeka and testified in support of SB 109. So naturally, I'm not going to be supportive of the resolution today, but I'd like to provide my reasons why, because I'm glad we're having a public discussion and dialogue on this, and I think it won't be any surprise to anyone, whether they're in the legislature or out of it, that we've got a split county commission on this issue. The liberal editorial page blog at the Wichita Eagle has had some comments recently, and I submitted a letter to the editor yesterday that I'd like to read as my explanation as to why I won't be supporting this resolution this morning. How much taxpayer money is being spent lobbying the Kansas legislature? That's a figure that no one in the mainstream Kansas media seems interested in discovering or taking the effort to compile. February 11th, 2013, I was one of a number of people who testified in support of Senate Bill 109 that would end the common and expensive taxpayers' practice of funding government lobbyists at the Kansas State House. There should be a public debate on how much of our tax funds should be used by counties, cities, school districts, and other local governmental bodies to lobby state government. I have opposed taxpayer-funded lobbyists who support increased taxing authority, restricting citizens' ability to force tax referendum votes, and seek to expand the use of eminent domain to take private property. I opposed taxpayer funding lobbyists before I was elected as a county commissioner. I support the ability of all citizens to communicate and petition their elected officials at all levels, but I have experienced the opposition from lobbyists who use our tax funds. Taxpayer-funded lobbying is wrong. That's the end of my letter. Now, I'm going to put the manager on the spot here and ask him a question, and maybe it's one more appropriate for the finance folks. How much money is Sedgwick County spending this year to lobby up at the state capitol, Mr. Manager?
I don't have that number in my head, but we can get that for you.
Well, I certainly like it, and I think it ought to be part of the public discussion, and I think it's true for all organizations, and I'd cite the fact that this commission has taken a position that's contrary to the Kansas Association of Counties concerning raising property taxes. And so there are other organizations, not just governmental bodies, and depending upon how you count them and how you construe the use of tax funds, I think there could be somewhere between 50 and 80 lobbyists, at least the last time I checked, and that was a couple of years ago, who are basically funded with tax funds to lobby the legislature on a whole host of positions like I outlined in my letter. So naturally today, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to be supportive of this, but I want to thank all of my colleagues for bringing this up so that we can advance the dialogue, bring forward the public discussion, because when I talk to citizens and they find out that their tax dollars are being used to pay for lobbyists who are often making over $100,000 a year, the outrage that I feel and hear from those citizens who say, hey, you mean my tax dollars are being used to lobby and taking these positions? And they say, that's wrong. And I agree with them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would want folks who are interested in this to know that our governmental representative in Topeka is under the authority and control of this commission and will carry out the will of this commission. He's not someone acting on his own or doing something contrary to what majority of this commission decides. He's just simply a information conduit and someone that represents us in many of the committee meetings in Topeka as we have instructed him. The Senate Bill 109, so that those watching can clearly understand it, the first 3 or 4 lines say in Section 1A, no public funds may be used directly or indirectly for lobbying. No public funds may be used to pay membership dues to an association that is engaged in lobbying the state. That would mean that essentially the Kansas Association of Counties, the League of Kansas Municipalities, the County Clerks Association, the County Treasurers Association, none of those, it would prohibit our membership in those associations because they do engage in lobbying activities. So it would keep us from membership in many of our associations that provide a broad spectrum of benefit and cooperation among different agencies across the state. I think it's, I understand Commissioner Peter John's comments. I don't understand referencing some things that we just don't support, haven't supported, and I don't think anybody in South Central Kansas supports, especially relative to eminent domain activities. We just, I don't think we have never engaged taking private property for other than public uses, and nor has the city of Wichita, and I don't know of other South Central Kansas governments that have done that. So that's one example that was given that I don't see the connection. But ultimately, our lobbyists are responsible to the commission board, and so that's the governing factor on what their activities will entail. So anyway, I'm still supportive of this off-agenda item and establishing a resolution that shows that we are opposed to Senate Bill 109. That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Renzow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My reading of the bill, I don't believe it does prohibit us from testifying up there without being asked. It makes provisions for that, and there are alternatives for providing financial support for lobbyists. So I don't want to oppose this resolution. However, if there are is there some confusion or concerns about this bill, I would encourage my colleagues to propose changes to the language of the bill to make it clearer and to ensure that clarify any issues that they may have, because I do believe this is important in general, and we should, however, have the right, and we do, to continue to communicate with them and share information. But I think there are adequate provisions in the bill, at least according to my reading, but I'm certainly willing to look at the proposed language changes, and I think the legislature is as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that. I know nothing in this world can happen for free. It costs money to go up there. If we go up there, we're spending, it's our salary that's being paid. I feel that my job here, I have an office here locally, so, we do go up to Topeka. We see them several times a year. So there is plenty of opportunities for us to interact with the legislator, but to, be up there on a daily basis to monitor situations and give us updates that when we need them that day is very important, to have somebody up there on a full-time basis. And they are, the government liaison there is indeed representing the majority of the commission. And there's nobody here sitting here today I can name that's going to be supporting eminent domain or increased taxes or find other ways to supposedly subvert the population. We're here to advocate for the best policies and intergovernmental communication, and I think this is a good way to do that. So if our lobbyist is up there advocating things that the majority has not approved, he's not doing his job, and he can get fired for that. Those are my comments. Commissioner Norton.
I have some grave concerns about the language in the bill. I understand that they're retooling some of the language, and maybe that'll make it more compatible to county government, but we have an obligation to advocate for local government. That's what we do. And many times as I talk with legislators that have not been a city council member, a mayor, a county commissioner, served on any board that's connected those, they don't really have a grasp of some of the unintended consequences of their actions at the local level. And I think it's imperative that we understand that, whether you call who we send up a lobbyist or government relations person or a liaison, it is our boots on the ground to understand in that short period of time what is happening. One thing I've realized about legislative actions is they take a long time making the sausage, but they don't ever produce any results until the last minute. And we have an obligation to understand how quickly things can happen in Topeka and how quickly they can have dramatic results downstream at the local level. And our government liaison, lobbyist, whatever you want to call them, is our person that communicates both back to us and upwards what our goals are as a local jurisdiction. I also worry about the unintended consequences. The county commissioners are paid in their work, and does that make us a paid lobbyist when we go to Topeka? I'm not so sure I understand that. Some of the language that's described is that if public funds go to other entities, that they can't have lobbyists. And I'm not sure I understand how that works. So I want to be sure that we do not move down this path and have a wealth of unintended consequences with what I consider a Senate bill that could be onerous to local government, and our voice and our partnership that we try to continue to have with the partners at the state. And I'm going to be in support of this resolution today. I believe that it's not good business to shut down the conversation that we have with our partners at the state level.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleagues because I think this dialogue and our discussion has been useful, and I think it'll be productive to the public today. I want to clarify one point because for 16 years before I became a county commissioner, I was an advocate on behalf of taxpayers and citizens who were concerned about growing government, and the U.S. Supreme Court issued a very odious and outrageous decision. It was called the Kelo decision on a narrow 5-4 majority concerning allowing local governments to abuse eminent domain. And when the Kansas legislature took this up at the time when I was an advocate for taxpayers up there, it was interesting because the opposition to trying to pass good legislation that would protect citizens' property and their ability to control their property, we were fighting taxpayer-funded lobbyists from local government. And I think that that's important to clarify that for the record. Now, it was the Kansas Association of Counties involved. Frankly, I don't remember specifically if they were or not. Was Sedgwick County's lobbyist at that time involved? Frankly, I'm not sure, and I don't know what the county's position at that time specifically was, but I will state that there were local government lobbyists who were opposed and wanted local government to retain full authority concerning the use of eminent domain for economic development decisions in the wake of the Kelo decision. And so I simply provide that as a little bit of context in terms of why there are so many citizens who are unhappy when we have tax funds being used and in my view, misused, basically to serve and in opposition to the citizens who pay those taxes positions. And I frankly think I may be on the minority on this commission vote today, but I think if the average citizen in Sedgwick County expressed their position, I believe I'm in the majority. But I very much appreciate my colleagues' attention and discussion this morning, Mr. Chair.
Sure, absolutely, Carl, and I appreciate that. And, you know, I know you've had concerns about, you know, eminent domain and such, and the reason I think this board needs to maintain control of eminent domain is because if we put that power in the state, it would put a lot of people who are not accountable to the voters in this region in charge of eminent domain. And, you know, that is a concern to me because we have our South Central delegation, and I believe they'd stick up for us in the case of eminent domain. But if you have lobbyists up there for other people, other corporations even, trying to do something, and the legislature makes a decision for eminent domain in our jurisdiction, that scare me. I'm very much a property rights person.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just state for the record, current state law, as I understand it, currently the power for eminent domain for economic development cases currently resides with the Kansas legislature, with the laws that were passed about 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
I'm not going to argue with that point. I'll have to follow up with you on that later. I'm not sure that's correct. That's not my understanding. Commissioner Under.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to be argumentative but perhaps Commissioner Peter John could tell me, you referred to everybody else in the category as a lobbyist. You refer to yourself as a taxpayer advocate. You were a lobbyist. Is that right, or am I wrong?
I was a registered lobbyist for 16 years under the laws requiring lobbyists, but I was not being paid by any public funds. But a lot of the folks that were testifying, usually on the other side of legislation that I was involved in, were during that period of time, and that practice really hasn't changed since I became a county commissioner, Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other comments here? All right. Have we had a motion on the table? I cannot recall. Okay.
We still need a second.
Okay. Is somebody willing to second the motion?
I thought it was seconded, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Commissioner Norton did second that. Okay. We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution. Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
No.
Commissioner Ranzau.
No.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Chairman Skelton.
Aye. Okay.